with William Ramsey, you have heard him speak many, many times, or maybe 6 or 7, about the work that he did with Prophet of Evil, short version, Occult Hollywood, which is just a DVD. It's a documentary. We talked a lot about that, and we've kind of done derivative shows off it with Larry and such. I don't want an update. This crap happens every time to me. Anyway, but we're going to go, we'll hit old territory, but we're probably going to go into uncharted territory with some of the things that William's got working, and it's going to be pretty wide open and no holds barred. So, William, thanks a lot for coming back again. Always good to talk to you.
Yeah, good to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Folks, I'll just say this to you now. Not that you don't know. If you're listening, you probably had to go to a site where there's numbers listed. So I think you know the deal. It's 618-912-4681. But, of course, we want to give William some rein here because he's going to lay out what is yet to come from the work that he has done. And I'll let him take it away. Go ahead, William.
Well, I just, we were talking about doing a show, and I have 2 new films that are going to be coming out in the next couple months. I've pretty much said I'm going to have them done by June, early July 1st at the latest. It's going to be a Cold Obama, and then Triumph of Evil, the George W. Bush story, essentially. And I think that I have some very novel, unseen information that a lot of people will find, at least people who are kind of involved in the new media or what we call conspiracy theorists or something like that will probably have a difficult time digesting or seeing because it's so brand new. So I was hoping to talk to you kind of about essentially how people believe or see things, what they believe in the world, and why we essentially believe what we do. And some people who have really tried to delve into that material and have a conversation about them, hopefully that will be, educational and edifying. And those people who I kind of went over with you is Philip Dick, Stanley Kubrick, George Orwell, and some of the other brighter lights of the Western Enlightenment thought. So I was just hoping to kind of go over everything and what's happening in the 20th century, and then kind of finish up with some thoughts on the New Testament and the gospel of Jesus Christ, and kind of see if all these things put together can really kind of give people a good understanding of why we believe what we believe.
Before you start off, I want to ask you a general question. I'm just doing a little series on While We Slept, which is how I found my way down the rabbit hole. And what really kicked it off in 2000 was this independent graduate MFA project that I had undertaken, in which I was going to demonstrate how writers, especially science fiction writers, futuristic writers, around the middle part of the 20th century, talked about or described the world that we would see in the 21st century. And that goes with the regular stuff like, Fahrenheit 451, Android's Dream of Electric Sheep, which is Philip Dick's work, Clockwork Orange, Brave New World, 1984, Atlas Shrugged, and some others. And what I was led to I actually kind of shifted gears and changed the theme of that paper. But what I'm going to ask you is, I looked at these guys, and I might have thought that they might have been smarmy and the joke is on us type of guys, but I don't really think so. I find it interesting that they all portended a not very bright future, and I think they were trying to warn us. So what I'm going to ask you is, and I don't know if you can answer this categorically, but you look at these guys like Dick especially, and I know that he's somebody who's really impressed you, and for good reason. Do you think they were good guys, bad guys, or, none of the above?
Well, I think that, some of them definitely had, I think, the interest of humanity in thought when they were doing their writings. So I think that, as far as good or bad, I think that, they were musing themselves about what was going to happen in the future. And I think that their concerns were left on the page for all of us to see, whether it's Orwell or Philip Dick. I think for sure, Robert Anton Wilson and his work, he was definitely illumined and, not interested in the best of for what humanity, was interested in, I suppose. But I think that, as far as Philip Dick, I mean, he definitely was a humanist, and I think that he was very much into theological and metaphysical issues, and he used the kind of the science fiction realm to have kind of a tabula rasa or a blank slate whereupon he could address the problems of the future. And I mean, he really was prophetic in a lot of ways, in the way that he was able to anticipate the problems that we're in today. And so as far as good or bad, I think that a lot of them didn't have a lot of conclusions, but I totally agree with you as far as their views were not positive and dystopian, and it's almost like they saw humanity really at the whim of institutions and technologies that we really don't have a good handle on, and that a lot of times, instead of being our servants, were our kind of cruel masters. And I do see that particularly today, whether it's Fukushima, which is still an ongoing problem, or the surveillance state, and the misuse of technology that we see today. So. Oh,
great point, by the way. Misuse of technology. That's exactly where I was going to go, because as I told you, I've already put my papers in to become a Luddite. So
gotcha.
I
don't blame you. I don't blame you.
Honestly, I think I know what I'm doing big time. Like when I knew to get out of mutual funds in 2002 and get in gold and silver, sometimes I do have a brainstorm, and this is one of them, I think, because every time I look at technology, I say to myself, if I were a bad guy, how would I use this against the population? And all the purposes are right there. What is your thought, though, yourself, from what you've surveyed with these personages, these authors? Do you believe that they look at technology as more curse than boon? Or
I would say so. I mean, I think that the technology, particularly 1984 or Dick, is really not that much of a helper. And they see it as like a burden, whereas people are using it. It's like their cruel master in a lot of ways. And whether it's the view screen and Orwell, or these kind of all these uses of technology in Dick's work, I think that I can understand why people would see it as something that's not that great.
Well, it's technology is like the old saw that gets recited every time that there's a shooting, that guns are bad, no, guns are good. Well, no, guns are guns. It's how people use them. So if we extrapolate that to all technology, I'm sure the same applies. So then, what I'm going to ask you is, are they, who are science fiction writers, making more of a state about flesh and blood and conscience and humanity, in the fact that it's that is turned bad, and will take technology and work for that purpose?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I think that they're really fundamentally interested in humanistic issues, but how humans relate to their more modern civilization and this modern technology, I think, is definitely kind of what they were talking about. And whether that technology is technology is for me, it's just such a broad issue. I mean, there's all kinds of issues involved, whether it's the media or it's the constant surveillance state, but in the paranoia that's associated with it. So I think that there definitely still were interested in how man relates to his surroundings, and I think that's kind of my general thought is, the technology, like I said, is not that much of a helper. In a lot of ways, it becomes their kind of bleak master.
I think you've probably seen this lately. I guess from your iPhone or whatever. If Junior's locked himself out of the house, Mom can just go ahead and punch a couple of buttons in the phone, and the door will open for him, and he can put lights on and shut lights off, and raise the thermostat. And I'm thinking to myself, oh man, I mean, just like OnStar, if they can open and close your, I mean, they can open your doors, they can close your doors. I mean, I just look at this and going, yeah, it looks really groovy, but you know what? I don't like it. So,
yeah. I mean, we haven't reached the end. It just is going to be more and more, and these even the Facebook, Google, iPhone, your own handheld processor is basically the power of a computer. 10 years ago, we haven't reached the totality of this technotronic era, I guess, is really it.
Right.
It's really kind of still in a natal state, I would say, and it's only going to get worse, and people are going to get more and more used to it. So, the next generation has not really been, for me, has not been forewarned about the implications and the long-term effects of where we're headed.
All right. One last thing, and I'm going to take the reins off you. You go ahead and start hitting it bullet point by bullet point. But I also find it interesting that all the authors, for the most part, dealt with a world under which there was no God. And in essence, if there is no God, then, and obviously Conrad was, I guess, the best exponent of this statement, and that is, if there is no moral reign on humankind, then humankind can only do one thing, as we saw in Heart of Darkness and then later made in the movie Apocalypse Now. So I think, do you think that they all knew that there was a dark side of man that usually works, is usually the strongest force when it gets down to it?
I would say so, absolutely. I think that they all looked in. I think one of the more potent commentators of the 20th century definitely had that in mind, is that there really was something scary and dark, and it created this paranoia in them. Whether it's Philip Dick, Kubrick, Orwell, Kubrick mined that dark heart of humanity, and most of his movies, whether it was Eyes Wide Shut or Full Metal Jacket, or what is the other one about the bomb? It's it's escaping my mind. But he definitely saw that there was a strong vein of madness and darkness, really, that affected our decisions, and I think that we can see that through the 20th century through these elements of these wars and mass murders and things that keep coming up, and it all kind of culminated really in the events of 9/11 in a lot of ways.
Back in 1970, I was a freshman in college, and the world was this country was very strange. Nobody has seen anything like those days. I'm sure they're going to come back in spades, but still, it is not as crazy back then. But, William, it's one of these things, is like, here I am, like I'm 18 years old. The world is upside down. I have no idea what's going on. And I go into an English lit class, and we're going to do a little Nietzsche today. It's like just what I needed,
Right. Yeah, right. I mean, it really is. There's a lot of madness, and you see that. And the movie I was trying to remember is Dr. Strangelove,
yep, right.
And then also Clockwork Orange.
Mm-hmm.
So you see that Kubrick was looking into all these things, and that's all his films kind of people appreciated him more over time. They all are have even better reputation as the time went on, and they contain repositories of these truths of the past, and I think that we've lived through this for decades. It's not something that is just something of first blush. I mean, these were issues. We're seeing the same issues of technology and paranoia that were afflicting Americans and the people of the world since the 60s, whether that technology was the nuclear issue or, this new capacity to have, thermonuclear war across all across continents. So, I think that it's still, these issues are still relevant, and people still need to wrestle with those and look into them and come out the other side and see how is it that these technologies are helping us, and how are they harming us? I mean, television news television is a technology that can be used well, but also can be used negatively. I mean, most of the mass media is absolutely 100% owned and corrupt and controlled. And how does that affect our consciousness and our mind? I mean, is it making us more wholesome characters, or is it actually turning us into fear-based, fragile, uneducated, uninformed people? So
I know how I'm voting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that most thinking people who are really conscious see the television as a detriment, and especially television news and mass media news. So, and I think that this goes back to what people foresaw, whether it's Orwell and the memory hole. I mean, Orwell got it all right. He understood it because it happened in the smaller past. Up until when he wrote that book in the 40s, he saw that things had been deleted from history, so he anticipated that happening in the future. And it's the same thing with Dick. Is like this perversion of of reality, and I think that's it's very important. And and there's different variations on that theme that even go back to 2,000 years to the time of Christ, and that's what kind of brings it all full circle, is that it's really a theological issue, is how do we perceive reality? What is the Christ's message in the gospel is a different way of sensing existence, different than the high priests and the Pharisees of that age, and also the other, people who had that other culture. And I think that's really what these guys were, thinking about, is really what is important in our perception of reality.
How do you want to take this? Are you going to do it person by person?
Well, we can start with Dick. I don't mind. I mean, I think that like I was stating, like these are the people I think who are really important, and their works are still important. Philip Dick is his films have been out there in the public, and they deal with these issues, and I think that. I just read A Scanner Darkly, and that's and that's a play on St. Paul's "We see through a glass darkly" on 1 Corinthians 13:12, and it's a fascinating book. It's a very important book, and I think that it really addresses a lot of our the issues of today, which are kind of like a lot of issues with the use of chemicals and drugs, whether recreational or whether what people perceive as psychological ailments, and that solution is in a pill, and how it wrecks people's lives and how it changes their view of reality. If you see so many of these people just going absolutely nut job crazy on these drugs that are supposed to make them feel better, I'm not a believer in what's called antidepressants or anything like that.
Well, let me hold you right there, because you mentioned two things. One, with these psychotropic drugs, or SSDIs, however you want to call them. And there's also the world we live in which we're fed information. The reason I'm making the dichotomy here is that, one, you got information that's supposed to be hardwired and really real and all that stuff, but of course we know it's propaganda, and that's being pumped into us from the time that we go to school and watch TV and listen to radio. And then when it all gets too much for you, and the TV will tell you that because everybody's out there hawking all kinds of psychotropic drugs.
Right.
What I'm saying is this, and Dick hit me right between the eyes. He's the one that when I saw that movie originally, it hit me hard, and then I read the book, and then went back to the movie again in some of its other various forms, with or without narratives. But my point is, we are given a reality through mainstream media that is not a reality. And then, so in order for most people in suburbia, especially in Pleasant Valley Sunday, to deal with the failure for them to succeed in an unreal reality, they take the drugs. So it's almost like a double bind. You're dealing with a matrix which is not real, but you're buying it, and then to cope with that, you're taking drugs. I mean, what does that finally yield? To me, it's a bunch of lotus eaters who are just just played out, blood sugar low people who aren't going to do anything except obey authority. Your thoughts on that, William?
I agree with you exactly. I mean, and that's the whole full circle, that kind of circle of death that Philip Dick brings up in A Scanner Darkly, is that, these people are taking drugs to get out of this kind of world, and then they realize the drugs are being created in the new, I think it's the new path place where they go to be rehabbed. They're actually creating more drugs to give it back, to start their full circle again, which, they're taking the drugs to get out of this bleak reality. So you see that I think he captured that perfectly. And in his, afterward in that book, he calls, like, the use of these drugs is kind of like a nemesis. It's a nemesis as divine retribution. Like, we shouldn't even be involved in this. So, I do think that a lot of these drugs, these so-called drugs that are supposed to help you, that so many people are on. And, I've eschewed the use. I just don't believe in most of the pharmaceuticals, whether it's for mental health or your supposed health, are bogus and useless. And even people who have come out of these pharmaceutical companies have stated most of our drugs have very nominal effect. And so many people I know are on drugs for, like, lowering your cholesterol, which are totally bogus. You could use a totally different route. But so it's a broader issue, but I do think that there's this ugly circle and this ugly false reality that, is being pounded into people, and they either buy into it or they just realize this reality is totally bogus, and they pull out of it. And, pulling out of that false reality that other people is in is very difficult. It really can create, battles within families, within husbands and wives and friends, and you realize who your friend is if you eschew this, this kind of reality, and it really is a metaphysical and a theological issue. It's not, it's a very serious problem that all people have. Like, what am I accepting as the proper, proper way to live life? And so I do think The Scanner Darkly is definitely a worthy read, and I think that Philip Dick really saw things that were a problem back when he wrote it and remain a problem.
Ray Nelson wrote the short story, and it's going to escape. I've been trying to, like, scramble to get that memory back, but it also became a movie. Oh, somebody help me out here. With Rowdy Randy Piper.
Oh, right. They Live?
They Live. Nelson was an interview, and he's a great interview. And I don't know if you're interested in any of the work that you're doing, but if you wanted an insight to Dick, which I mean, Nelson doesn't kid around. I love that kind of interview. He doesn't fool around with bullshit. He gets right to it. And he's an honest guy, and it's just really, you can feel the sense of his own, the power of his being. I hate to sound like new agey, but I mean, this guy still can bring it. And talking about Dick to Nelson gives you a different side of him. Not bad at all. I mean, I've seen some things like on YouTube, which is kind of like strange and stuff, but I don't care. The thing is, what is the message? And the message was for us to beware of exactly what's befalling us right now. You can't fault the guy for that, but sometimes, as I think you alluded to, and I was kind of kidding around with Nietzsche, even with people who are Christians or just, I don't know, whatever you want to call them, virtuous pagans, according to Dante. But, if you hang around this Pandora's box of occult and stuff, you almost get invested by it. So there's a point at which you might want to divest yourself. And I just wonder sometimes, with a writer like Dick, how they can deal in that world. Although they're making money, I guess that's fine. But you know what I mean? When that is this, and even you, William, you can speak to this. You deal with this subject, and it can get to the point where it's like a tar pit, where you went in with both feet and you can move around. And suddenly you want to get out, and you can't. Now, first of all, do you think that befell Dick for as much as you can find out? And secondly, why don't you tell us too about what you need to do, that if you're going to be in this world and report accurately and not let it affect you, how you balance that?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I mean, it is difficult. Sometimes I feel like I'm a stranger in a strange land in a lot of ways, walking around. I can understand why our common culture is involved so concerned with zombies is like a common cultural meme or theme right now, because I think that so many people are zombified. And it goes back to kind of the they-live dichotomy. And it actually goes back to what you were talking about being why we slept and slept awake. I think that's a common theme in the they live. There was something like inside the church, and and then it goes back to theology, but inside and they live, there's something written on the wall where it says the title of the film comes from something in the movie where it says they live, we sleep. So there's an acknowledgement that the people are asleep, and it goes to the elite masses dichotomy as well that, Kubrick talked about in Eyes Wide Shut, and, one rule for the masters and one rule for the people, and also, that was an issue for Dick as well, but this they live, we sleep, and it's interesting that the Randy Roddy Piper saw that and then comes back to the church later after it gets, razed to the ground, and that sign has been painted over. So, they don't want the message of understanding and to be awake to be understood.
Now, what about yourself? I mean,
well, I feel like I'm coming out of a slumber as well. I'm a product of public education. I used to believe all my textbooks that I wrote. I think I've imparted that to you in some of my conversations that I really kind of became awake when I saw like the Waco stuff and the things that happened with Ruby Ridge. Not that I was a real believer in those people. I'm not a real admirer of Dave Koresh or anything, but I just saw that the killing of those 86 other people was totally unnecessary and bizarre, and it made me question my reality. Like, what was true? Was the media telling me the truth? I'm on like a path and a journey of understanding how much of the past is real or not, and so I think that's why this conversation that I was, wanting to have with you and what I've learned is very important for other people as well. Like, what reality do you choose? I think there is a choice.
I want to. I'm sorry. Finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just saying, it's a matter of free will, but a lot of time that free will is taken away if you get bad information. And I use the example of like a cigarette box. You think you're going to get a cigarette with just tobacco in it, and it doesn't say, there's nothing else on the box that says it's anything else, but essentially all that tobacco that's in a Marlboro box is tainted with about 50 other chemicals they spray on there. So, in some sense, you think you're getting one thing, but you're really getting another, and it's a level of deception and omission. Like Orwell said, omission is the greatest form of lie. Well, what else has been omitted, not just from cigarettes, but from our understanding of reality? What's been omitted from our textbooks? What's omitted from our media? What's omitted from medical practices and from business practices and all kinds of other things that, the knowledge of the Federal Reserve, which a lot of people are, justifiably interested in, has been omitted from textbooks. The reality is that it's a private bank. It's really not serving the public. When we have ostensibly this thing that, we have this great democracy and, the republic and, why are we subject to a group of banking cartel,
I wanted to interject.
And that's just one small part of it, sorry.
No. I didn't want to let this go because it's part of what I was saying with While We Slept. One of the things that happened that made me go, and it involves the Waco situation with the Branch Davidians. I think that was 93. I think that's when that was. A Renaissance landscaper who's a character in my life I refer to every so often, had a brother who was a lawyer. And a day or two after the Waco compound raid, his brother came over, and I was talking to Renaissance landscaper. So the lawyer came up, and he goes, "Oh yeah," he goes, "Yeah, we knew that was going to happen." And it's like, "Well, who's we, and how did you know?" And he was saying, just being over in the county seat in Hackensack, New Jersey, there was a skinny going around that they were going to, BATF and other agencies were going to raid the compound on that day. And he looked at us, and of course, first of all, we're dealing with two guys who are like Mensa, all right? So, I'm sitting there like, I say as little as possible. But he looked at us, he says, "Well, didn't you wonder why all the news agencies were there capturing the thing from the very beginning?" And I'm like, "Well, I thought they just had a vigil going all the time." He's like, "No." What he said was, he goes, the BATF at this very moment and through this whole thing was before a Senate subcommittee on appropriations or whatever, trying to make a case for the reason why they needed more money, and what was better than a raid on these bad old people in Waco, Texas. So, there you go. It was one of those things, which I included in While We Slept, that made me say, what the heck is going on here? Because,
Right.
I mean, I'm thinking it's organic, but it was scripted. It was all set up to go. And the cover-up with John Danforth later on, I mean, was an absolute, I mean, I'm not into
abomination. It was disgusting. John Danforth came out as the kind of Christian overseer and just tried to whitewash the whole thing.
Oh, they did.
I mean, he's a disgusting character, a real monster.
Hey, that's why he's a senator, man. I mean, that's what they're all about in Washington. So, I mean, the point I was trying to make about this is that there's a reality they show you on TV, but it wasn't a reality at all. There was no need to do any of that stuff, and it had to happen, so they had the big display.
I know, and that's kind of bolsters my point. Is that for me, I took everything at face value. Oh, bad guy, Dave Koresh is bad, and he might have been an awful human being, the worst person in the world. But the way they went about it did not justify all those other people who probably were dupes and unwitting, acolytes of the power, Christian power grab or whatever. Didn't mean that they had to go down with him. They could have. Apparently, my understanding was he was a jogger.
Yeah,
he would leave the compound. Yeah, he would leave all the time. They could have, if he was such a bad guy and involved in so much bad stuff, they could have, accosted him at the store or whatever. He didn't hole up in there in the compound or anything. So yeah, you're right. It was totally scripted, and that's not something that I understood till much later.
Yeah, me either. But that's another thing that was a brick in the wall to where I am now. It was an accumulation of things that went, that just didn't get told to you in the media, and then you hear this underlying skinny that is really accurate, and then you're like, okay, what is really going on here? And then of course at that time too, we had the whole thing with Grenada. Oh no, we didn't use gunships to go in. And it's like they show you the video. There's all kinds of air gunships. It's like, come on, man. I mean, what is it?
Yeah.
So.
And then the cover-up from Waco was also something that really opened my eyes. They were clearly shooting people there. I mean, it was a military, and apparently there was somebody who was a whistleblower, and somebody came by and microwaved them to death. I mean, there's all kinds of weird things that happened around Waco, and that just opened me up to how many cleanups and how many times that this country has engaged in cover-ups where 10, 20, 30 people will just suddenly end up dead, whether it's the Kennedy assassination, Martin Luther King, Robert, Kennedy. I mean, all these people, it's not just them who get shot, but there's also a whole spate of other people who get cleaned by very skilled and very professional cleaners.
Going back to Philip K. Dick, though, would you rank him as your favorite? And if so, why?
Well, I would. I would say that I think that he really captured this kind of alternate reality. I think he also he was very much a humanist, and, it's kind of something I talked about, is that he was really interested in the human condition, and the way that he was interested is comparing people to robots. And so it was this kind of human versus machine, and he intentionally blurred them, but also I think that he eventually was trying to figure out what made people the most human, and it goes back to kind of his theme in Androids Dreaming of Electric Sheep, and that movie in itself was kind of who's human and what makes them human. And it's interesting in that film, the robot at the very end helps out the main character Decker, and pretty much saves his life and makes him, in the time that this one robot appreciated life more than the other humans out there in some ways, and saw that it was things were worth saving as he's about to die. So he sees the sanctity of human life that a lot of other humans don't.
Yeah.
And so I would say that in some, I haven't gone through and read all of his work, but I would say that I've appreciated him more and more the older I get and the more understanding I get of kind of the human condition, definitely.
I'll throw you one more comment, and we'll do a little business so people can find out how they can purchase your wares. The one thing that struck me, and we had talked about this in a conversation separate from this, in that, and I mean, I'm not ancient, but when you get to this stage of your life, you realize you're on the far side of the hill. And I also think of the line from Bonnie Raitt, in her song. She says, afraid to run out of time. She says, life gets awful precious when there's less of it to waste. Right. And when I looked at The Replicant, played by Rutger Hauer, that was a great scene, and you'll admit to that. And even his ad-lib lines just worked. I mean, you just don't mess with that. It's a one take, let it go. But
right.
what the narrative said in that particular movie, that there was allowed the narrative by Harrison Ford, he made the mention about at the stage that replicant was at, he just loved life more, even if it was somebody else's. Hence, he saved Decker, who he had every reason to break in half and scatter into pieces. But I'll also say something, and I was talking to Trudeau about this, and it's like, I look at insects now or things that invade my household, and I'm like, instead of like stepping on them, I'm to a point now where, and I don't mean to trivialize this, but it's like, I just want to scoop them up if I can and throw them out. Go outside and, do what you got to do. There is a certain preciousness to life, anyone's life, or anything's life, when you get into a state and you realize, you can see the end of the finish line. So, that's why I thought that particular scene, and I don't know if Dick ever said anything, or do you know when Dick died?
I don't know the exact date.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever got a chance to see that, and I can't remember the credits and all the other stuff, because I actually still have that on DVD. But I just thought that was one of the times when a cinematic rendition of a book actually did it justice. That's all I can say. Yeah.
Well, he died in 1982, so he was.
He might have seen rushes, or if he was involved in it, but it was never out. I don't think it got out until '83.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I think that they had the right director for that movie. I think that the guy who was the director of Blade Runner is pretty sharp. It's Ridley Scott. So I think that. And the original film they did was like re-edited by the execs because they thought it was too out there. So they put like a narrative. Harrison Ford had to come back and do the voiceover. But I think that he was really true to the book, and there were other things hidden in there about whether the main character was a replicant or not. And so I definitely that book, that's still one of the greatest movies ever made, Blade Runner, and still definitely one of the best science fiction movies ever made, no doubt.
That brings us around to what we've been talking about as well, and that is in the world of Blade Runner, Decker emoted so little that they wondered if he was a replicant, because they didn't have reactions like when they would give him that visual test about what happens if you saw an animal's carcass on the wall or something like, or a bear's rug or something like that. But that's what we're talking about, and that's why one of the things that hit me between the eyes, and that is we're looking at a society that if the handlers, the social organizers, wish to continue, is a world in which nothing's really going to faze you, and you're like in this some kind of like, not la-la land, but, and it goes back to like this whole milieu that we're dealing with zombies. Isn't it interesting that all of a sudden zombies became like some kind of cult thing, like after we got done with the vampires and the Gothic thing? Now vampires, zombies all over the place, and this is what we're talking about. Just as you're doing this interview with me, we're starting to see things that come forward, and they all tie in, and that is an unemoting society that's not going to get too upset about anything. I will do as I am told. I will not feel anything. And we see that.
And they have their Soma drug, just like
with Huxley,
the guy from Brave New World said. These people do not react. We've just been cheated out of what? Trillions and trillions of dollars by our bankers. We essentially have this kind of debt of slavery society. We're consistently lied to about the state of reality. We're in a dystopian society. Look at how anything's changed in the last 12 years since 9/11. Nothing's really being built. If you go through America, it looks like a wasteland, and it's created. It's intentional. It's not something that happened by accident. It's because the controllers want it that way, and nobody even revolts. And they go for these half-assed, public displays like, the 99%. But what's changing? You got black suited thugs out there, and we're just drugged out, and they chemtrail you. Nobody does anything. You get lousy information. It's amazing. We're in a dystopian society. We're in 1984. We're in a Brave New World. We're in a Philip Dick book. So, that's really the reality, and it's a reality that most people cannot accept.
All right. At this point, as I promised so long ago, why don't we talk about the website, William, and also what you have out? And can you give a little teaser about what you think will be released during this year?
Well, yeah, I'm working on kind of redoing my book, so a new edition will be out hopefully in the next I just have to find the time, but I'm going to upgrade it, I've got some more information that kind of ties into the 2 documentaries that I have. I'm doing an iBook that has a lot more visual, like a visual study on Crowley, and most of the stuff will be accessible through Apple's kind of distribution stream, as well as Amazon, whether it's a Kindle or CreateSpace. So I've just decided to go that route. It's a lot easier, especially, I'm not going to have any type of I'm not working with any publishing house or anything. Everything I do probably from here on out will be self-published.
Not that you have to answer me, but do you find it's more of a financial cost thing, or is it because you don't get a lot of help sometimes when the themes aren't what the publishers want?
Well, I haven't really kind of revisited the publishers, but I don't like some of the cuts and some of what they're asking for. I'd rather just do it myself. And I think that most publishers are headed that way. I mean, even the lady who made Harry Potter, what's her, gosh, I can't remember, but she's decided to self-publish her next book. So I think that a lot of people are realizing that these publishing venues are really may not be, especially with the advances in technology and distribution and the ability to kind of get your own stuff done. I think that that's really the route. So, I think I've talked to you. I mean, some of the people I talked to were like, they were going to give me 12% of net profits and stuff like that, and that's just not the route I want to go.
All right, but the book can still be bought. Prophet of Evil,
yes.
Is that correct?
Correct. It can be bought on Kindle, iBooks. It can be bought through Amazon, and it's definitely accessible out there. It's still being sold, and I sell quite a few books every month actually without doing too much.
Have you ever blocked out what you want to do? I don't know, for whatever period of time. I mean, is there a finite end that you have already known you will reach, and how you're going to get there? Or is this going to be you'll just deal with it as you get to it?
I think I just do it as I get to it. I mean, I still have other projects. I've got all these other things. I mean, I really want to get into kind of working on the history of kind of elites and elite perversion through history. And as I continue just kind of my recreational reading, I find out more and more. So that will be my next project after I finish these ones. But I just, I've been reading a lot about, I read Traum Novelle, which is the book based on, that Eyes Wide Shut was based on, and also the writer who helped Kubrick write that, a guy by the name of Frederick Raphael. And he wrote a book called Eyes Wide Open, his workings with Kubrick. But this guy Raphael had referenced something about John Kennedy. John Kennedy is, he was definitely a dual-natured elitist, and he spoke quite a bit about, public verities, but privately he was definitely a rake in a lot of ways. But apparently he had his own kind of Hellfire Club or, Eyes Wide Shut Club that was called The Free, and this is referenced in Frederick Raphael's book, but The Free, who had something very similar to Crowley in their dictums, do what thou wilt, or which was, the Hellfire Club motto, but theirs was enough is never enough, and that was Kennedy's friends, and they saw themselves as the free among the slaves, so they had this duality of this kind of master servants or the slave shall serve kind of ideal, and they were all Democrats, ostensibly, dedicated to the plight of the masses, but it was that their hypocrisy. They were hypocrites. I mean, and Kennedy in a lot of ways was a hypocrite. I admired a lot of his public statements and his speeches, but his private mannerisms and he was pretty amazing what he was up to behind the scenes. And even Raphael talks about people who died mysteriously under Kennedy and who are associated with this society. And he even references Plato's Nocturnal Council, which was Plato's own kind of star chamber / idea of people who would solve things without public involvement. So, even Plato had his own kind of hellfire view. Yeah, so, I mean, it just goes all the way back, it goes back into, the Venetian nobility through Hellfire Club, through
the Golden Showers Club.
Yeah, I mean, it's always there. And apparently there was a Hellfire Club out here in L.A. during the 60s that one of the Wilson brothers was involved with. So, this is something that I would like to kind of understand and get a better understanding, because, the Hellfire Club back in the 17th century or the 18th century made tons of decisions that affected the history of the United States. I mean, all those guys who were involved in that were essentially our adversaries in our Revolutionary War. And, Benjamin Franklin was involved in that, and, I think we discussed that briefly. But so I think my research will just be ongoing and cover things that I'm interested in, I think in some.
Well,
so there is no end, unfortunately or fortunately.
I was going to say it's the show that never ends.
Yeah. So I mean, the thing is that I'm still in the process of learning and understanding and putting the pieces together. I mean, the sad reality is that I've spent time in a history degree learning about the past, and I've learned more outside of my, training, or I guess my degree, than I did while I was doing it. And so, I'm still putting the pieces together.
Training was a good word for it, by the way.
Yeah,
that's a Freudian slip. That was
training.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Training.
Well, I mean, I don't put a lot of value in my my degrees. Unfortunately, there's just a hoop to jump through in a lot of ways.
Yeah, we all know that. That's why I have 3 of them, and here I am.
Yeah.
Okay.
Same here.
All right. We're going to take a break later on, not right now. But, I mean, if people want to call in, you can do that. Understand, we'll take the break at the top of the hour. I got it about 49 minutes after the hour right now. And also the number, if you're interested in, folks, is 618-912-4681. With a subject like Dick, as far as bringing that up at the beginning, you could spend about 7 hours on that.
Absolutely.
And it would deserve it. It really would deserve it because, again, that was his works were very powerful. And as you said, it's interesting that he took a riff off the Bible with Scanner Darkly. Do you want to talk to Flow My Tears at all, or anything else that he did in the time that we have left before the top of the hour?
What was the other one you talked about? Oh, Flow My Tears. Oh, yeah. Well, he just all his books involved like alternate worlds, dystopian kind of views. But he wrote a book called Flow My Tears that essentially it deals with somebody who lost his identification, and I think it's pretty interesting that how important our identity is and what the state identifies us as is, and I think that was something that he mined, and that it shows like how much we are attached to it. Like I think he was like riffing on the concept of like how we attach to our Social Security card, our credit card number, and how we've been given a number. We're essentially in for better or worse, to a greater or lesser degree, might as well be numbered like somebody in a concentration camp. I mean, and how we've come to accept that as our status in our society. So I think that he really I think captured and really looked into effectively this kind of enemy that we have as far as our relationship to the state and how we've been tagged by them and how we can't get away from certain stuff because the state has tagged us from birth.
But also you've mentioned this too, and we kind of, in the outline that you sent me, and we talked about this a little bit at the outset, and that is, and I don't know, is this a quote from a Dick himself about reality is an illusion?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was it. I mean, it goes how illusory our reality is, and that and the memory. I think that was somebody, who was talking about kind of the Buddhist ideals. So, I think that is it's an interesting theme that reverberates through Buddhism.
What I also thought about, and I'll say this about Dick hitting it on the head, and I don't want to beat this into the ground too much, but I'm just going to tell you, this is what I saw. I think everybody who was involved with that work, I mean, who read the book Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, who saw the movie Blade Runner, whatever it was, the thing that I found so interesting, and I'm sure a lot of folks did too, is that he portrayed, and I'm assuming this was out in California. I think that was the geographical place at that time or whatever the western coastline looked like at that. at that.
Yeah, a lot of his books were based in California.
All right, and I saw it happen in Jersey before I left, and that is this, I don't know, this mishmash of cross-culture, biracial, triracial children that are coming out, where you had, if you remember in the movie, you had Asians walking around with like Latino skin talking German.
Right.
And I remember one day on a very especially warm fall late afternoon, so that everybody in the world came out because it was like October and you knew this couldn't happen too much longer.
Uh-huh.
Pilot Pete and I are, interestingly, sitting in my car waiting to get Chinese out of a place across the street, and we're looking at all the youth that came out because it was a spanking day, so everybody knew make the best of it because it's not going to be here probably tomorrow. And I looked at everything, and I said to Pilot Pete, I go, man, look at this. I said, this is Blade Runner. I mean, I don't know. I'm not getting, like, racist about it. I'm just saying that it was like, I don't know how Dick, if he was getting lucky or understood that there would be this, like, tremendous I don't know if homogenation is the right word. I don't want to use bastardization or mongrelization, but you would have
you could say miscegenation, which used to be a horror word, but
yeah, but it's only all that means is that you have triracial
right.
children. You're right.
Right.
But I mean, I looked at it all.
Well, they call them Californios out here, which is somebody who doesn't fit into to preset state mandated racial or ethnic groups, because they're like half Korean, half white, and the white guy's half French or whatever. I don't know.
I know, and that isn't a knock. It's just that he made a projection where, like 10 years later after I encountered the work with Pilot Pete, and we're sitting there and we're looking around at everybody. I mean, it was a great day, no two ways about it. But I'm like, this is Blade Runner, and he's like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be that way in the future. I mean, I personally, I don't even put in a racial group. I don't consider myself falling under what the state defines me. I refuse to accept that. I'm definitely not a Caucasian. I mean, a Caucasian is some bogus term that some German guy made up in the 19th century based upon what he thought were the best-looking people in the world, which were people who lived in the Caucasus Mountains. And that term has stuck with us for that long. It's a joke.
I had a professor at Jersey City State, Frank Maselli, who was a real he was great. He could have done comedy on the Ed Sullivan Show. But he's like, talking about especially American, like, biases and just the way we look at things. He's like, yeah, great. What do we call children? What was the word we used to use? Mongolian, was it?
Oh, yeah. They used to have this Mongoloids.
Yeah, Mongoloids. He's like,
yeah.
He goes, well, how do people in Mongolia feel about that? It's like, yeah, it's true,
Well, I mean, I remember when I was younger, they used to refer to black people as Negroids and Mongoloids and Caucasoids, and they had all these weird terms. And, I mean, it kind of goes back into the potency of language and how we define reality through the definition of our terms, I mean, I have people say, oh, you're a Caucasian. I said, no, I'm not. I have people call me all kinds of labels, Anglo, Caucasian, white. It's like, well, I'm not really any of those.
I was just thinking about applications in the future that ask you about, are you white, are you black, are you this, are you that? I'm waiting for the time when they come with the checkbox that says all of the above.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's eventually. It probably will all be cappuccinos. That's probably what it'll be. Like, are you a cappuccino? Are you not? I mean, and it's just a bogus labeling structure whereby people can get benefits or not get benefits from some state-mandated bogus law. It's absurd. Sure.
We have some people that are emailing me, and I'm going to tell those people, you got to call in. You can't be bashful. We'll do this on the other side of the top of the hour. But you raise good points, folks, and so why don't you just go ahead and call in, because I know you want to, and it'll inject some new genetic material into our discussion. But while we got about 3 minutes left, though, what I'd like to do is what are you going to come out with strictly documentary DVDs, or are you still going to do something with what we would call hard copy text?
No, I'll do both. I think I'm moving towards both. I've talked about finishing this Children of the Beast book forever, and I still am compiling information and, working when I have available time. So that'll be my next book. And, they kind of play off each other. I mean, it's just like I was able to make that documentary with still pictures that I had from Crowley into, like, the Prophet of Evil movie. So I think that'll probably be the same thing. I mean, I'm finding more about Leary that is just really, his history is really as incredible as Crowley in a lot of ways. His who he mixed with, where he was. I didn't know that Leary was off the stage at Altamont, when the Stones were playing. I mean, it's just an incredible moment when the Stones are playing Sympathy for the Devil. The guy gets stabbed, and there's Chief Illuminist himself, Leary, who's a hardcore follower of Crowley, sitting right off there. And that Altamont was, a watermark in our cultural history. So.
Well, you know what? When you say that, it makes me wonder then. And Go Ratley would love this kind of stuff, and so would Colden. But are you intimating, or are you not? Though it may be the fact that was a sacrifice.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think it was just a bunch of Hell's Angels going crazy, whether it was a sacrifice and where they got worked up. But if you see some of the documentaries on Altamont, these guys were juiced up on all kinds of drugs. I mean, it's clearly psychedelics are being taken by guys from the Hell's Angels. Whether it's intentional sacrifice or unintentional, I don't know. That there was a racial element involved. There had all these, white guys, and the guy who got stabbed was black. So,
I remember those. I remember those days, and of course, we had also, right after Woodstock, we had the Manson murders. Not that he killed anybody, but of course, we did have that scenario. I believe that was after. I always go back and forth with this about Adam. I have my own categorization of a timeline which I lived, but what made me, kind of like think about. You can't do Woodstock again. Woodstock was an absolute fortunate accident. And
yeah, I mean, they did a Woodstock again. I think the Woodstock 2 devolved into overpriced commercial
of course.
Nightmare that was muddy and turned into a riot where they took all the stands and burned them.
Yeah, but right in the wake of Woodstock, which worked out so well, I think the West Coast is trying to do something that would approximate that because, hey, look, it worked really well out there, and it did, but I don't know that the organizers were so sure that would be the case because of all the things they had to face. And I would say to folks, just as an aside, there's a fiction book which is definitely based on fact that I think is very, very introspective, a very good magnification of what took place in the preparation of Woodstock called Barefoot in Babylon. They hedge their things by saying it's fiction, but, you'll all get it. It was absolutely a fortuitous accident, and it worked out very well, but you can't do that again. It's almost like, it's just one of those things that one day it worked, but if you try to get those same items aligned again or whatever, it just couldn't happen. And out in the West Coast, it certainly did not. Yeah,
well, I think it's the spontaneity kept so many people out of it. I mean, so many like commercialization elements to it.
Yeah, good point. Yeah,
that was kind of like its blessing, that made it kind of more pure than let's plan this 2 years ahead, and then all of the parasites and carpetbaggers can come and try to make as much money off it and capitalize on it and advertise on it.
I tell you what, we're going to go to a break now, but that good point, because you know what we used to say as when we were young and dumb. The best parties were those that were never planned. We just said, hey, look, I think something's happening here, so let's just use the phone and see who comes. And it was great. Try to plan something? No way. Can't happen.
Right.
You get everybody in that you don't want to, and it all goes to shit, basically. All right, Big Jim, if you want to cue that up, you can by all means. A break music. We'll see you in about 5 minutes. We're with William Ramsey, Prophet of Evil, Occult Hollywood, and so much more. See you in about 5. All right, I think we're back with William Ramsey for the second hour. We're talking about some of the work that we talked about the work he's done, and we're going to talk about the work that he's going to do, and that's where we are right now. Also, folks, for those of you who have sent some comments, don't be shy about calling in. I don't think William would mind it whatsoever, and again, some of the things that you've written are worthy of a discussion, so by all means do it. If you don't, that's okay. But I'm not reading emails on air. I'm not doing it today, so take that. Secondly, the front is upon us. The squalls have started. I have no idea what's going to happen, but if we get a break in communication, I'll try to get that back again. It's not really the season yet. It usually happens in June, but we needed something badly, and we've got it, and it's happening right now. Lucky me. All right, William, we'll get back to what we were doing. We talked about Philip Dick as a prime exponent of futuristic science fiction writing, and that it doesn't necessarily portend a great future for us. Did you want to get into, and I'm going to let you go at this point, and you've been very good about taking my questions and such. I appreciate it. Do you want to get into some of the themes, or where do you want to go with this?
Sure. I mean, we can talk about that. I think that, Dick's themes are, man versus machine are very common. I think it's also his view of reality and how reality is influenced by technology, and and he also was a metaphysician. He was into religion, so I think that it was the nature of the world, and he'd either had a psychotic or mystical break, and he wrote a book called Valis, which stands for Vast Active Living Intelligence System. He kept having flashbacks. Mm-hmm. He was also extremely poor. He kind of lived a life of kind of like a Van Gogh. He was he never made money from any of his works during his life. Well, not much. And he also had a problem with a lot of writers, which is fairly usual. I mean, he was a drug user, but he's also a methamphetamine user, and I think that influenced a lot of his views. I mean, he was obviously very paranoid, but so he had. I think that he was still kind of he ruminated about those issues throughout his books. He was, interested in social control. He had lived through the 60s and 70s and had seen everything happening in Northern California, and I think that influenced him.
All right, we got a caller. I mean, be careful what you ask for.
Okay, gotcha.
So, caller, are you there? Come on. Oh, it got dropped. Oh, all right.
All right. No worries. I mean, so those are kind of the themes that permeated all of his works, and I think that there's not only are themes that were important to him then, they're important to us now, which makes him even more relevant. And still, all of his films kind of dealt with these types of issues. So I think that they kind of left a lot more questions to be asked than real answers in a lot of ways. And I think that your solution, as far as absolving yourself of a lot of technology, is I think a valid response. And I kind of think of Frank Herbert's books too, where a lot of his Dune books, they had after had all these problems with technology, had eschewed computers, and nuclear power and stuff like that. And he was, obviously another science fiction writer and futurist. But
let me run this by you. And I mean, the caller dropped. The caller is back, so let's do that. And folks, understand that I know when you're there. Just hang with me because I don't want to be too rude to William, as beyond what I do normally. So, if we got a caller, by all means, come on.
Hi, it's Kira. How are you?
Oh, now that my hearing is back, yes, I'm fine. How you guys doing?
Oh, am I loud?
No. Don't worry about it.
I'm not talking really loud. Well, I didn't hang up. It just dropped. It went
okay.
Dead.
Okay.
Hi, William.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? I wanted to tell you that I went on Amazon and I rented your Occult Hollywood Volume 1.
Good.
Very good, very good. I recommend anyone to go on to Amazon and watch it. It's really worth the time, and I couldn't believe how cheap. It's very reasonable.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I think the rental fees are what, $2.99? Is that right?
$1.99 for 7 days.
All right.
Yeah.
So what did you get out of the content, Kira?
What?
What did you get out of the content?
Well, you know what? It really just. I had no idea, actually, because he had the snippets of the films, how much occultism and how early it started. Like, I actually thought it started more in the 70s when they had, like, Rosemary's Babies, but he has snippets of films. But, I mean, they actually, they showed the actual ceremonies. It's almost as though they're taunting you. They're like it's openly showing you these ceremonies that are supposed to be so ultra secret.
Yeah, those are based on books from a follower of Crowley, and that character was based upon Crowley in that book. In that film, which was what's the title of it now? I can't remember. Pull that up.
See, if I do that, everybody.
I watched it back in January, so I can't remember the name of the film.
See, if I forget, I'm called old. William can forget, and it's just like, a brain fart.
No, I have this somewhere. The film is, it's by the author.
Give us something we can work with, William.
Yeah, it's let's see, where is this? I'm gonna find my file here. Where is it? Not Angel Heart.
Oh, that was one of the worst. Damn.
Yeah, that's also in the film too.
Boy, that's probably the darkest film I've ever seen released, like, commercially.
Yeah, it's a rough one to watch. There's no doubt about
it. That's the one where in the end he was doing the killings?
Yes. Yeah, with De Niro and what was it, Mickey
Rourke.
Yeah. And he realized he was the one, yeah. But, I mean, the whole thing, De Niro played that up well. I mean, I watched it once and I thought I could do it a second time, but the second time I watched it, I was like, I can't do this. It was too good in what it did. Which makes you sometimes wonder about Bobby.
Yeah,
definitely.
Well, it's like...
well, I wanted to bring up, you had been talking about JFK, and I wanted to bring up, I recently read his 19-year-old mistress just wrote a book called Once Upon a Secret. Her name is Mimi Alford.
Yeah, she was an intern, wasn't she?
I'm sorry?
Kira, she was an intern or something like that in the White House, right? And she got, quote, preferential treatment.
Yes. I mean, she was just out of high school, and he started sleeping with her. And then he had her take care of his friend, which was sort of her handler, and oh gosh, his name is escaping me now, but he was devoted to JFK. I mean, he kept all his secrets. He was kind of a PR guy, and they were swimming in a pool, and he asked her to take care of him, and then watched her do it, and she stuck with him all the way up until I believe when she got Jackie Kennedy got pregnant with Patrick. It was right before then when they broke up, but it wasn't until he asked her to take care of his brother Ted that she finally said no, and that's it. So, we at least have one person who came out and said, he was sort of into that group hedonism. I don't know what other word to use for it.
Well,
Kennedy was had some very interesting, habits. This is a polite way of saying it. But there's also another book that came out about Kennedy's, another of Kennedy's flings. It was one of the girls who was, her last name is,
Is that Mary Pinchot Meyer, the one that just came out, that saying she was assassinated by the CIA?
Yes, correct. And Cord Meyer was her husband, and Cord Meyer was a CIA agent who was very responsible for the control of the media, and she had been killed in Georgetown, and she was a socialite. But
execution style, right? Like right to the head, execution
right to the
style.
Head. Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah, and what is now?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
What is the reason, the premise as to why they're saying that she was killed by the CIA? That's all I had read was the introduction of what the book is about, but I haven't read the book.
Well,
Why are they saying that they did kill her?
Well, they were the CIA was after. I guess she had gotten a lot of information, or there was a bunch of information that she had from Kennedy, and I think that somebody had mentioned that like the bastards got her or something like that. But she was killed before he was, she was killed after October 12th, 1964. So it was after Kennedy was assassinated, and I guess the rumor was she knew too much, and she had associated with a lot of the people that were involved in the assassination. But her husband, Cord Meyer, was a high-ranking CIA official, and the book that just came out is let's see, it's called, oh Lord, I gotta find it. It just came out. I actually just read something about it the other day.
Yeah, so did I. I can't remember the name either, but I mean the deaths around Kennedy.
Yeah. There was a movie about her called An American Affair, which starred Gretchen Mol, but the book is it's called A Very Private Woman: The Life and Unsolved Murder of Presidential Mistress Mary Meyer. So that just actually came out. I guess it came out a little while ago. I think that was, yeah. So anyway, that's an interesting story.
But Kira and William, one of the things that you have to understand, and that is when you get to high places, anything goes. And I mean, evil's been with us forever. It doesn't get more sophisticated. We've had these discussions. I mean, it hasn't changed since Jeremiah. And this stuff goes on. That's why Eyes Wide Shut, even more than Angel Heart, because Angel Heart was another whole thing. But as far as obviously socially cemented type of behavior was portrayed in Eyes Wide Shut. And that's pretty much the way things go. How women get involved in it or why they want to, that's another whole thing. The old saw is, men go for sex, women go for power, and that's where they meet. And usually the male, being that mostly male politicians yet, get brought down because they think too much with their little brain, and, you're leaving a trail. And Kennedy, as Fetzer would say, although I can't stand the guy, Jack was a coxman. Well, great. That's terrific, But George Bush, Daddy Bush, also had a scandal which was brushed under the rug. Lyndon Johnson had one, which we've all heard about. But this goes on in high places. And I'm not knocking women or anything like that. But, I mean, the thing is, there's something that goes on that attracts both parties. And it usually doesn't wind up very well for the, shall we say, the non-luminary. But it goes on and it goes on and will continue to go on. And people have no idea the debasement that takes place. And I don't know, William, if you were looking for something you wanted to chime in.
The actual book that I was wanting that wasn't the one, I referenced the book about her murder, but the one that just came out is called Mary's Mosaic, the CIA Conspiracy to Murder John F. Kennedy, Mary Pinchot Meyer, and Their Vision of World Peace. And it was the author is Peter Janney, and Oliver Stone said, a fascinating story. Peter Janney's unsparing analysis moves us closer to a reckoning. And then also Jim Marr says, Mary's Mosaic must have solved a great murder mystery. This is a must-read. So that's the book that I was just reading about the other day. But, I mean, the scary thing is when you really peel back the curtain, how far back these misdeeds go and these murders and the perversion and everything. It's really pretty amazing, and how much isn't reported by compliant or complicit media entities, whether, it goes back for hundreds of years.
Well, maybe the reason they are elevated is because they have those perversions or those secrets, because you can control someone who has that. But someone who doesn't, and you put them in an audience into a position of power, you don't have the control factor.
Yeah, I mean, that's like what happens in gangs or any other kind of group, is everybody shares in the same traits, and then they all keep quiet, That's how you, murder somebody into a gang, whether it's the mob or the mafia or even the Crips and the Bloods, or whether it's the Mexican mafia, you you engage in something that everybody keeps to themselves, and it binds you together and keeps all the outsiders out, I guess.
There was a statement, I don't think it was John Lennon. I can't remember where it came from, but it said, you elect people because you think they're so much better than you, and then you find out that, in fact, they aren't. But that's the way it always goes. We go through this campaign season right now, this like tribal ritual, where everybody's painted as being great, and all these platitudes come out, and the things we're going to do. We go through this like tribal ritual 2 to 4 years, and then at the end, nothing really happens. But we keep going back to this, and that's why I'm looking at this particular presidential race, and I'm laughing because it's like, yeah, you hear all this stuff that should be, but after the voting goes down or whatever happens, we're back to the same old stuff. In fact, it gets worse. But that's the way we keep doing it. And I mean, to me, I don't understand. It's like I said, it's like, when will Charlie Brown ever understand that Lucy will pull the football away when you get ready to kick it, you dumbass?
Right. Well, I mean that's like the whole hope and change. How much hope and change have we gotten in the last 4 years? Really, we didn't get any change, and there's still no hope. I can't believe anybody would go back and hire Obama for another term after this one. I mean, he kept the same policies that George Bush did. So. No,
you got him for another 4 years.
Well, to tell the truth, I'm sorry.
No,
I can't believe any of them are viable candidates. I mean, look at them. It's almost as though they're mocking us with these choices that they're holding up. They're so Newt Gingrich and Rich Santorum. Oh my God.
Kira, let me address something. You sent another email to the effect about the way people act with technology. In this case, cell phones or whatever, in the face of a obviously life and death situation. Do you want to expand on that and what some of the observers chose to do, instead of aiding the injured?
Oh yes, a few months ago there was a lecturer at a college lecture, and at the podium he had a massive heart attack and he fell. The man fell and then fell off the stage. And these kids, the college students, they stood up and started snapping pictures with their phones to post on Facebook and Twitter and to send to their friends instead of running to help them. And the teachers who had been in the wing, I mean, there was the other ones who finally, got into mode to assist this man were so outraged that they actually, brought this when the story came out, they actually brought it to. They said, I couldn't believe the amount of kids that just stood up and started taking pictures and never assisted this man having a heart attack on the ground. Instead, they would rather post it to Facebook and Twitter, and their friends would say, oh, my God, look what I just saw. It's almost as though they think they're in a movie, and their sense of reality is so distant.
Well, the reason I asked you to bring that up, and William, you want to address that by all means, but I did ask you to bring that up because this goes back into the theme that we were talking about from the beginning of the show about reality and unreality and how technology especially can either, I don't know, it kind of at times just meshes both, so that, I mean, people look at everything that happens as if it's on TV.
Right.
All right, so go ahead, William, take that if you want to.
Well, I do think it's important. I mean, I think that people emulate what they see on TV as their, what their ideal reality is. So it goes into programming and what some people have called predictive programming, but it's just straight out, mind control that this is it. You get up, you go to work, you work for 8 hours, you get a paycheck. I mean, all this talk about jobs, get a job, and, instead of a career or working for yourself or something like that. I mean, these are all things that are conditioning and molding the whole population. So I think that, and this is all through technology. So, we're used to it, but in a lot of ways we might as well have something with a bullhorn, coming from the state telling us to do all this stuff. And it's like things like, they say like, after 9/11, George, why don't you just go out and go shopping, get back to what's normalcy. And when the normalcy can be seen as thoroughly abnormal. So, the technology has given people at the top incredible power to affect millions and millions of people with, their view. And I think that's one of the things about how reality is shaped by people in power who do not have our best interest at heart.
All right, then let me take it one step further, because I think this is really the sad part about the whole deal, and that is if all kinds of catastrophe and murders and death and accidents, whatever it is instantly caught by someone and put up on the net or whatever, what I'm thinking is that, and this goes with video games also, where you have to kill people and take people's heads off and all this other crap,
Right.
especially military games. If you get a desensitization about snuffing out something which isn't a real life on the screen, but it does translate and brings you into the real world, and are we looking at human beings who are treating real life death, misery, catastrophe as just something else that was like basically on a computer screen?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I was just reading the other day that Anders Breivik guy from Norway, he trained for his mass murder spree where he killed 80 people or whatever, playing online video games. That's what he said he trained on. So, and he detached all those people on a video, and that's an alternate reality. I mean, look at all these alternate reality games and lives that we live, whether it's through Facebook, Zynga games and Castles and World of Warcraft, and these are other alternate realities that are sapping us from our life. I mean, literally, there could be a time when people could just live their whole life through a computer, and they do it. I mean, there's addictions to these online alternate video games where lives are ruined, and it's like a drug, And I think that it goes back to your point that these are training, and even the military has stated that a lot of the games they put out, the U.S. Army has put out a game that is essentially just a kill fest online, that they haven't even been shy about saying it's a training manual for our troops, or a training guide, So, and then you can go to the drone wars. I mean, essentially there are people right where I live in L.A. who go to work every day, set up with a drone over Pakistan, blow people away, and then go home to their wife and kids. I mean, it's disturbing. It's crazy. So we're in a dystopian society.
We are, yeah.
I mean, we people are saying like this is rising, or we're moving into Babylon, or this could happen. It's happened. We're past that.
We're here.
We're here, and we're going deeper and deeper.
Kira, got a last question?
Well, no, I actually didn't, but I really enjoyed talking to you both, and thank you, as always, for an entertaining afternoon and entertaining show.
All right, thanks, Kira.
Thanks, Kira.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Yeah, this is great conversation on a Saturday afternoon.
Well, in some ways you have to kind of look at you have to address and accept that this is not the best of all possible worlds. I think I wrote in my outline to you that Voltaire Voltaire in his great work Candide, which is still, a foundational book in our Western,
yes,
repository stuff, address these problems, and it's about reality. Pangloss is referred to, one of his characters in that book is referred to as the big boob who didn't address the problems of reality, and he was still spouting after being beaten and waylaid and had all his money stolen, and the thing is still repeating this is the best of all possible worlds. And there are people out there who still emulate that same kind of dictum today, like, this is the best society we've got. We're in a state of evolution. We're getting better and better. And they literally believe that. I mean, that this is, that we're in some kind of evolutionary advancement. I'm not saying on a genetic level, but on a political level. And that's just a preposterous lie. And, they're either ignorant or they're just lying to themselves.
Did you want to go someplace? I have a question for you.
Go, fire away.
All right, I think this is a fair dinkum. Because you do the work that you have done with Crowley and other things, I think you might have been misunderstood by a great number of people out there. And this happens because you have dealt, and I've been through this, and I learned my lesson. I'm not saying it's the same with you, so don't get me wrong. Do you find it discomforting that when you have delved into this dark side of world history, let's call it that, because it goes beyond just local stuff, that you're perceived as being not a Christian.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's unfortunately, what happened. And I think that the problem is people take a surface approach and a surface view of what I've been doing and think that I'm some type of, and somebody who's trying to initiate them instead of reveal it and reveal this information. So, I think that I probably should have emphasized more where I'm coming from, but also one of the reasons why I didn't is I find that disingenuous and labeling myself.
Yep.
So, it's a hard it's a hard line to draw, I guess, where I have to, make that statement. So I just explain it, and I just kind of reference these things as evil and not good and secretive, and, so I think that, it goes back to, just trying to reveal these dark things. We do see through a glass darkly, and the more light we can shed on the darker elements of ourselves and our political world, the more likely it is that we would avoid these things in the future and also help us wake up. Because the reality is that these are very dark times, and there's a lot of very strange things happening. This kind of occult conspiracy is taking place on a global scale right now through our political spectrum, through our entertainment field, environment, and it's having a tremendous deleterious effect upon our society. I mean, people literally are so freaked out and so scared by this constant barrage of bad information and weaponized information that, they're trying to find some relief, whether it's in the false panacea of pharmaceuticals or, drugs and alcohol. I mean, there was a kid that, this happened a couple weeks ago. I don't know what the whole story was, but he jumped off a cliff here in L.A. He wouldn't jump until 11:11. So for somehow he had freaked out and saw that, these things are really happening on kind of a witchcraft, old religion basis. And I don't know what the whole story was, but he had this obsession with the number 11, and it's really a terrible situation, that these kids are being born into something where 9/11 has happened and that that bubble hasn't been popped, and that this occult conspiracy hasn't been revealed or enough, and that a lot of the ostensible Christians are fighting it, but I just don't think they're working hard enough. The people in the churches are like, we go back to the beginning of this conversation, they're still sleeping. They're not in a state of being awake. And, it's interesting, that goes back to a theme in Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, where it's a dream story. What's the dream? What's awake? Are we going to be fully awake, or are we going to be automatons and zombies and go through day to day? And I think for me, in my work, kind of bring it full circle, is that I'm trying to be more awake and put stuff out there that, shows that there's a lot of things that are happening under the surface.
We got another question for you that came through email, if you wouldn't mind.
Far away.
Are you familiar with Jay Weidner's work on Kubrick?
Yes.
Do you want to give us a comment on that?
Well, I think that Kubrick was obviously a polymath. He's very sharp, autodidact, learned everything himself. I haven't really gotten the whole moon theory thing down, but it seems like that there's a lot of bogus elements to it. If we were able to get to the moon, why aren't we there all the time, And, the story of Weidner is that Kubrick interspersed a bunch of information regarding the moon hoax into The Shining. And, it seems like it would be something that Kubrick would do. He did not, in his works, he did not feel obligated to be fully attached to the ground or base stories that he based his films on. So, I do think that it's interesting that he put all these other symbols of the moon into his film, and he was comfortable with symbology in his films. He did it through all of them. Having starting all the way back from 2001, he understood the power of the visual symbols. So, in 2001 is definitely, there's a lot of occultism in there as well. So,
you've done what you've done, and I have also, and I've asked you how you get through that kind of thing, because without getting too personal, you have a family. We'll leave it at that. There will be seed from you that will live on. And we're not really looking at a very good situation to come. That's not because you or me or any person or anything connected to what they call Christianity, which is like, I don't even know what that word means anymore. It doesn't mean we want this to happen. It means that we've taken a look and we have believed on Scripture for a certain portion of what is going to come. And it doesn't mean we will it into existence. We just are aware that it might happen. But we're in a situation, I think, right now where, what these science fiction writers wrote about in a secular sense is not necessarily not supported also by Scripture, which is not the fact that Scripture is based on what they did. Of course, it's the other way around. And although it is bleak, and you and I have had these discussions, and I've had emails ad nauseum about, you're a pessimist. Look, all I know is this. Forget whatever I am or whatever I belong to or my beliefs, but any, I think, reasonable human being, maybe it has to do with age, and now I'm in my 6th decade, takes a look around and says, you know what, realistically, and here's the point. You and I kidded around about me putting in my papers for being a Luddite, but I'm serious to this effect. Mainstream and all this other crap, it's a lot of noise. It's a lot of gray stuff. And it muddies the waters of truth. And I think the Internet is the chief culprit for this, because it elevates the bullcrap with the real. And all I'm saying is that I can figure it out. I'm all right. You know what I mean? I know where this whole thing is going. That doesn't make me a pessimist necessarily, but it makes me understand that, for all intents and purposes, why are we all kind of like understanding we're headed to probably a big drop off a cliff, and so tell me, because you and I know both, how I get hit and how you get hit with these our belief system and the fact that the Bible's garbage and everything's going to be okay in the end. All right, I won't say anything more, please.
Well, I think that's one of the troubling elements of our current state is some people seeing value in the Bible and some not. And, I don't know how much I can do to change people who don't see the life of the Messiah as important. So, it's a tough one. And I think that Christ was a reality changer in some ways. You just to use that word is like, what's your paradigm? What's your way of looking out? And some people are going to have that change. They're going to be able to take that shift and see that Christ offered a different choice, a different way for people to live. And, I think that some individuals will get it, some won't. And, it comes to free will and taking that step. And, reality and faith are kind of interesting terms, but it's really a matter of, do people want to take that road? And some people don't. There are people. They're clearly infiltrators into what's called the truth movement, and people who really aren't interested in the truth as much as just spreading more myths. And a myth is a more detailed form of lie in a lot of ways. So, it's a tough road, and I think that it's really a matter of choice in a lot of ways. Is people what do they want to see? And I think that it's a tough question, But it goes back to the dead burying their dead. Do people want to see where the final answer is? And some people can see past the temporal realm into the spiritual realm, and some don't want to or can't, and that's part of the way that they've been conditioned. And it probably was the same 2,000 years ago. There were people being conditioned by the priests and the Pharisees, and we have our modern priests and Pharisees. They're high priests of technology or high priests of the media, But in some ways, they're conditioning people to believe in one system in one way, where you can have money changers in the temple, and Christ came in and said, no, there won't be money changers in the temple. You know, we're going to have there's something more important than money associated with the temple. Well, you know, we're really not that different than 2,000 years ago.
One of the things that I came to a realization of 2 months ago, like I said, it's not a big aha, but I do believe it explains a lot in civilization, and that is, and I've said it before, I'm not going to belabor this, and I'm going to go on to something else that, you know, I want to ask you about with regard to the work you're doing, and that is human beings will behave in the same numbers in the face of the same stimuli. It's just the way it is. It really doesn't change. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but it's the history of the world, and to think that all of a sudden all the, shall we say, peasants or whatever you want to call them, will finally have some kind of, like, sorry for this word, illumination, and suddenly turn things around, is just not in the DNA of the whole damn planet. So don't expect it. I am all for a fair fight. If we don't have a fair fight, I got to be at least honest enough to assess what's going on and saying, we can't do this. And,
right.
I've been misinterpreted, as you well know, about like, well, you know, we can't beat evil. Well, if you want to fist fight it and shoot and throw, you know, you're not going to do it. But it's our belief system based on Scripture that, no, evil's done with, but we cannot beat principalities of darkness with fists, guns, and bombs.
Agreed. It's a spiritual war. At foundational level, it's a spiritual war, and that spiritual war is based upon discernment, perception, and perception of reality, and the free will of the individual to change that reality for either what's good or what's evil. Some people use their free will to put together an evil system that is burdensome and is involved in MK Ultra mind control, weaponized information, etc. And some people are trying to fight against it, and I consider myself as part of the latter, where I'm trying to educate and show and ultimately have people reject these false realities or false paradigms. And, you know, that's what I'll continue to work as far as I have time and you know, free time to put things together for people to watch and see.
Now, it would be fair to say, because I felt this way for myself, although you'll find out for your own self, that people will cleave to you because of the information you've given based on documentation, no two ways about it. The solution, they may not all be that crazy about, but be that as it may, I mean, again, hearkening back to Dante's virtuous pagans, they get it, but I think it comes to a point where the solution is not really palatable for them, and that's where we part company. But we can all agree on the fact that where civilization is going, though it may take, I don't know, it could take a millennium. I have no idea. It's not really good.
Right. Well, I mean, that's it. I mean, the thing is that you can see the problem, but the solution to these problems sometimes is worse than acknowledging it, you know, because what it requires and what it requires of the individual is to make personal changes and also demand greater changes in the external world, you know. It's like, I mean, there have been times where there have been revolutions in thought and revolutions in political stuff, whether it's American Revolution. But, you know, the revolutions in thought that took place due to Gutenberg's Bible and all these other things resulted in a lot of people getting killed. You know, there was a 100 Years' War that just scorched the entire European continent between people labeled the Protestants and the Catholics over, you know, who was going to free up just the Bible. I mean, people take it for granted that they have a Bible they can reference, but back in the 16th and 15th century, the priesthood and the priest, under, you know, using as much priestcraft techniques as possible, tried to keep that knowledge from everybody, and it created cataclysmic wars that wrecked whole. I mean, I know specifically Germany. There were whole cities that were just laid waste, literally nothing left. It's actually referenced in "Sympathy for the Devil" by the Stones, which is fought for 10 decades for the God they made. But my point is that we're at another juncture or point in world civilization where, and it's going to be a world civilization whether we like it or not. It seems like that's the way all the political people are going, where people are going to have to make conscientious decisions that are not going to be pretty, because you're going to be forced to take a chip. You're going to be forced to categorize and collate your children into state-run institutions if you're not already. You're going to be kept away from homeschooling. You're going to be kept away eventually. Being a Christian or being labeled one or reading the Bible at some point will probably result in social ostracism at best and worse, straight-up persecution. So, you have people who are putting these things together through the UN. So it's tough. I can see why people don't want to face that reality. I can see why they want to put their head in the ground. I can see why they want to take those, whether state-sanctioned drugs or otherwise, to not have to address these painful issues. I mean, so you can recognize like you said, you can recognize the problem, but to solve it, it's going to be a tough one. And there are people 2,000 years ago who made the decision to follow Christ. A lot of them were persecuted and killed. And there are saints today, whether it's Stephen getting stoned or Peter and Paul being hung and crucified or beheaded in Rome under, I think it was either Nero or what was the other guy's name? Caligula. So it's conflict is, I think, will be inevitable. And I'm not saying it's a violent conflict or a war, but it's everybody makes their choice, and there were the ramifications are very severe or serious. So and I think that's the way it is, and it's all prophesied in Matthew. I mean, Christ talked about it. Some will fall away, and some people will stand up, and we all have a choice, and it's a difficult choice. And if you don't choose not to decide, it's still a choice, just like Russia.
We got about 10 minutes left to go. I don't know if you're at a juncture where you might want to depart us. If that's the case, that's fine. If not, I have a couple of more questions. How do you want to play it?
No, far away. No, I got 10 more minutes.
All right, cool. All right, now, in some of the points that you sent me, and I think, I don't know, we'll definitely not be able to give it all the coverage that we have. I don't know that's really important, but at least the bullet points should be put out there. You talked about false realities. I think to a certain extent we did cover that. Human versus machine, we talked about that a little bit. The nature of God and social control. Now, that's a big mouthful in a sense to try to cram into 11 minutes or so. But knowing, I mean, what you wrote me, if you're going to hit the high points out of what I just spoke right here and about what you wrote, what you want to touch before we have to part ways.
Well, I think that, Dick was still involved in social control. I think that he had seen everything that happened in the 60s and 70s. He thought that history was illusion, which a lot of people are finding out that history is illusory. I mean, there's a surface and there's something far under the surface. And, and for him, the empire never ended. So you see the empire versus the rebels or the democratic ideal duality repeated, in his outlook. So, I think that, and those are still the issues for today. I think that we clearly are an empire, covered in the velvet glove of democracy, but it's just baloney. I mean, there really aren't any democratic values in this country, and the elections are fixed. So, you can't, maybe at a local level there are issues that, can be resolved through democratic means, but all the elections, at least 2000 and 2004, were clearly engineered. So,
without a doubt,
So I think that's why I think that this determination of what is our reality. I mean, in the 2 hours we've discussed, is really a lot of people in the truth movement or the new media or whatever are really trying to go back and determine what at least the honest purveyors of information are, trying to determine what's wrong with our current reality and trying to fix it, and assessing that this is not the best of all possible worlds, and either addressing it on a political or spiritual level. Those are the honest ones. And then there are other people who want to push this reality into some kind of new mythos that's similar to Nazism, some kind of creepy third way where they're going to tell you that centralization of power under a global entity is going to create this wonderful utopia that is going to just have the greatest opportunity for humanity, which is a complete and utter falsity and lie, and that's probably the biggest illusion of all. So, kind of rambling.
No, that's what you're supposed to do.
Okay.
But I recall a lot of things that from our discussion, it puts me back as a freshman and sophomore in college. And like I said, that was an absolutely crazy time. I mean, I couldn't make sense of any of it. And most people couldn't, although you'll get people who will demonstrate even because, like, they're supposed to demonstrate. And I'm not mocking it. It was just like, I'm trying to figure this whole thing out. And, man, it's really giving me a headache. But one of the things that happened, I had a literary masterpiece course in my freshman year at college.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to read Voltaire. And, of course, this has got nothing to do with religion. It's all secular. But what I had to laugh at, Voltaire, do you remember a phrase of his that says, man must cultivate his gardens? Do you remember that at all?
No.
Okay, that's cool. But what I thought was even more telling, and this, of course, is in a secular setting, in a university, Fairleigh Dickinson, and it is reported that Voltaire, upon his death, sat up and said, there is a God. And then
really?
Yeah, and I mean, this wasn't a church. This was, just like the history of the thing. And I mean, I'm a freshman. I wasn't saved. It doesn't matter. But I thought that was interesting because if the legend is true, I mean, the reportage is true, Voltaire sat up and said, there is a God. And then he went back to sleep forever. I don't know. It's a nice, it's a nice advertisement. But understand that it was not promoted by any Christian sects. That was supposed to be the real skinny, as told to me by my prof.
Well, I mean, I believe it. I mean, I know that there's all kinds of deathbed confessionals by a lot of people, that they live their life in a secular manner, and then all of a sudden they get real spiritual right at the end. So,
Foxhole
he was rumored to have been an Illuminist. So,
hey, whatever. We got a caller in the waning moments. By all means, caller, please come on.
Hey, how's it going, guys? I don't know if you guys are doing anything off topic or whatnot, but I was wondering, because I am a resident of Indiana, and the first I ever heard that place had any significance whatsoever was on one of your pre-recorded shows I was listening to not too long ago. I was wondering if it wouldn't take up too much time, if you could just hit on the key notes of the magic squares or whatnot, or what you guys might think the relevance of Indiana or Indianapolis in particular might be.
Caller, you're referring to the stuff I did with Schneider.
Well, okay.
No, that's okay. No, I mean, but that's I'm right there, right? With Robert, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I didn't. I looked for some stuff online about it, and looking for any information online, especially in this area, is it's a little rough. But
all right, no problem. What I'm going to do is I'll throw it to our guest. If you want to address that, but I can tell you where he was going with that, but let me just shelve that right now. So, William, can you talk to that at all?
No, not really. I mean, what do you know? I don't know much. Right. I don't know what he's referring to, actually.
All right. Will you allow me?
Yes, please do.
All right. Robert Schneider, I think it's Robert. I'm not sure. I had him on a couple of times, and he is a Christian, and he was very much involved with, I guess, pagan practices and a certain amount of magic that was involved in the laying out of Indiana and other places. Caller, does that sound kind of right to you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I apologize. I thought it was Mr. Ramsey that was talking about that, but
that's okay. But you're here, and anyway. Are you willing to discuss that?
Yeah.
All right. Here's what I took from it.
That sounds right.
Schneider, I think, is right on the money. And he has a lot of good, causes. He sent me his stuff. He's been on the show. But what it underlines, I think, is the fact that, the country for the most part is not a Christian country. It was not founded on any of those principles. And pretty much whatever happened because of, and you're going to have to buy into this, I think, or not, but the evil versus the good and the purposes for nations. And I know that's very, way out there, but Schneider's right. The Grange, which everybody thinks is just some kind of funky little farmer thing, is very much based on Freemasonry. And it was Schneider's...
wow, I never knew that.
You never knew that?
Oh, no. I just got into this about 2 years ago, and, I'm a good... fairly good at picking up BS, and I first started listening to you about 2 months ago. I'm still digging through some of the old recordings and whatnot, but I agree with pretty much everything that you're saying. But as far as the Grange goes, my great grandparents had a farm in Ohio, and they were big into that, and I never knew that. So again, I just knew they always went down to the Grange, and that was about it. But
understand this.
It's deeper and deeper. I
have an uncle who is 98, who was a third-degree Freemason. He never got out of the Blue Lodge. Is he a demonstrated Christian to me? Yes. Do we talk about it a little bit? Not much. And I'm not going to skewer him or anyone else, but I will tell you this. Schneider's onto something out there, and the Grange, to me, is pretty much innocuous. But, again, how far do you want to go up into the degrees, and what are you involving? So on face, I wouldn't say, they are demonic or whatever, but it is, I have to say, a little interesting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I never knew. I was in a fraternity in college. It was only 6 years ago, and I never understood any of the ritualized stuff, and it was just like, this is stupid. But, once I kind of, woke up, going back to, something that you guys were talking about recently, it's all incredibly based on the occult. There's really nothing else. And it's once you figure it all out, it's like this whole country
is based,
set up that way, and it's so, I won't take up any much more of your time. Sorry about that. I thought you guys were. I thought Mr. Ramsey was the one talking about magic squares or whatnot. But
No, I'm familiar with some of that, but I don't know how. I understand that a lot of cities are laid out on mathematical guidelines, and there probably are magic squares. Crowley was very much into magic squares, and that'd be my chief part of reference. But I just don't. I don't even know what the Grange is. Is that the city or?
No, it's a fraternity of farmers. Wouldn't you say that, Cole?
Oh. Yeah. It was all the farmers in the area. They went to the Grange, and
interesting.
Might as well have called it the Lodge, apparently. But,
well, there's all kinds of those. I grew up I was born in Nebraska, and they have something in Nebraska called Aksarben, which is Nebraska spelled backwards. But it was like a place where the elite of Nebraska, of Omaha, would meet, and they still do, but they engage in the same kind of weird elite rituals, dress up in costumes, drink, cavort. So there probably are these things in every city.
Caller, have you ever talked to Schneider?
No, I haven't.
All right. I'll tell you what. He's been on a couple of times, and he's a good man. If I can get him back on, would you be interested, in perhaps asking him the questions you are now?
Oh, absolutely.
No,
I grew up in Indianapolis, so I can tell you a little bit about it. It's not interesting by any means, but I guess this makes it a little bit more interesting. And I'm actually downloading your iBook Aleister Crowley iBook. I couldn't tell you the full
Okay.
title. But downloading that now, so I'll get into that, and maybe next time I'll have some relevant questions for Mr. Ramsey.
I'll interject and say that wasn't not relevant what you just asked, but I'm going to ask you something just out of curiosity, okay?
Sure.
If you don't mind, and that is the thing that bothers me, and I have talked to William about this. Forget that we're Christians or whatever that means, all right? The hell with that.
Uh-huh.
But I have wondered to a great extent when people delve into the evil side, let's say, of what's going on, and with all the logos, and I'm sure you're aware of that, have all, occult trappings, the way cities are laid out, blah, blah, blah. What I'm going to ask you this, and this is really just a survey question. At what point does one stay there and say, oh, I want to do more of this, or does one say, I get this, and this is the way things are, and I'll have nothing of it? I just get concerned, and I'm not saying this about you, but that people will go into the occult.
Absolutely.
Okay. Go. I'm sorry, I talked too long. Do it.
No, you're good. It's absolutely relevant, and I think I know exactly where you're going with that.
Okay.
It's when does it stop becoming some sort of information that is new and exciting and that you never knew about? If you're, a thinker and you decide to delve into things that you just want to know, especially something like this that has a good deal of relevance as to the way things are going. But when do you stop?
Yes.
When you understand the basics and you can say, oh, yeah, look at that corporate logo, there's another one. When do you stop and say, yeah, maybe, and in my personal case, I went to Catholic school probably, 5 years, but, they don't teach you much of the Bible on that.
No.
But as far as you're concerned, for people worrying about that, I can't tell you for anybody else because I'm the only one I know in this city that knows anything about this. But, I attribute to you personally kind of shaking me a little bit and saying, stop going too deep into this, because at a point it gets too much, and then it becomes, you get lost in the occult. So if I have one person to thank for kind of steering me back towards faith, it would be you, and I'm just starting on that process.
Okay.
So thank you, and you can put a check mark off on Viz,
Okay.
But I thank you for that. So I don't know. It's I'm afraid there are a lot of people out there that find it interesting, because it is interesting.
Absolutely.
And they never look at the other side. They never go back and read the Bible. And I found that I'd start talking about this or thinking about it, and it's like I only know about the occult side or the occult version of things, and I know I don't want to. That's not the side I want to be on.
Okay.
So I'm looking back at the Bible and what it said, and in particular what Jesus said, and so I can get to know the guy.
That's a pretty fair assessment, and that was a real statement by you, and I have no doubt in your sincerity. I'll say this. I'll try to get Rob on, and if you want to send any pointed emails, do it to visigoth@hotmail.com.
Okay.
And that's between us, and I'm going to tell you, thank you for the call. That was really precious. It's a bad word to use, I guess, but I really mean it. And I thank you for doing that.
No, I've been thinking about it for a little while, because I know that this can be upsetting, especially someone like you guys that are out there doing this stuff. And at this point, I agree. It's what can you do except save souls, like you said, and you guys are doing that, so you might as well have some recognition, or at least I can do is say thanks. So,
All right, thank you.
I'll shoot you an email. Thanks for the time.
All right, thank you, brother.
Thanks for the call.
God bless
you guys. No problem. Thank you.
This is all your fault, Ramsey.
I know.
But that's why we're here, though, isn't it? I mean, that's really why we're here.
I think so. I think that's what motivated me to write that first book and kind of progress down this, is just try to educate people and lead them towards, my version of truth and your version of truth as well, and that is, Jesus Christ is the Messiah. There is a life after this one, and that there is an answer. And, I think you've said bringing, the only way to go is up, but there's also, a way to bring up down. So, it works both ways, and, there is a solution. It's not a total solution, but, as far as our political thing, but that the political issues have never really been solvable, at least since the beginning of time, at least, back from Genesis days. So there's always been those political problems, but there is a spiritual solution.
But you know what? When you came out this time, and we know why we're talking about this a little, especially, we'll call it, and that is, you have to stand for something, and you are doing that, and it has to be known. We don't like religion. You don't like religion. I don't like religion. We're not into any of that stuff, but there is something that's real. With a caller like that, to me, man, I tell you what, that's one of the best I ever fielded. And I think that's a great point. But there'll be people who don't want to know about that, but you can't do anything about that. Now, you are putting this stuff out on the table, and stuff is going to happen for the people who want to think. And so I thank you for that, because I tell you what, if you get a lot of snowballs thrown at you, it doesn't matter. It's got to be out there. And once you get the message out, it can't be unheard. And whatever happens after that, it happens. But I'm going to leave you with the last statement, because we are running up against the hour, and you've done a great job, and it's always good to talk to you.
Oh, great. Thanks for having me. It's good to talk to you as well.
All right. Now, you get a last summation statement if you want to.
Well, I think that just to kind of, to bring things around, it's just, it's about reality, and you can make a choice to change your reality in yourself. And I think that the best choice for that changing reality for yourself and your family is to go back and actually read the Bible in a good version, revised King James version, who incidentally recognized that there was, King James gets a lot of bad publicity, but he was very cognizant of the fact that witchcraft was recognizable. He'd actually written a book on demonology himself, and had experienced witchcraft in northern Scotland, which is a whole nother show. But my point is that, read the text. I think the words of Christ are still, the best way to go for individuals, and I think that people can find a lot of solace and a lot of answers to their questions, and that's the best way to do it. And prayer is always effective, and being alone and praying to Jesus Christ to love the world. He says, I essentially love the world, not as the world loves, but so, and everybody is always, when they ask questions, they always receive an answer. So.
All right, good point. William, you're going to do a lot more. We could have done like 5 hours, and it still wouldn't be enough. I just hope you enjoyed it, because I did. Yeah. So,
it always passes fast.
It does. And again, you do have a busy schedule. You have a family. And I think people should know that, only in the sense of you've got 24 hours in a day, and you've probably allocated all your duties to about 36, so it doesn't fit really well. And I understand it without a doubt, but that's the reason why we like you guys, because you and myself and other people have done it without looking for any kind of aggrandizement or financial. I mean, yeah, you want to make money with the documentaries, and that's cool, but the research and the time, we are getting feedback, and that's driving me crazy. But anyway, I'll bid you goodbye, William. Thank you very much. This will not be the last. Okay.
Yes. God bless you. Take care. Have a great weekend.
All right, and before goodbye, William. And I tell you what, before we go, I want to thank everybody for listening, and also to make note of the fact that Big Jim does this and makes it possible. Angie on the website makes it possible, and there won't be much more left. But I thank you very much for staying with us. And as that one caller, it just really struck me. It's like, yeah, we're giving you the real deal. I don't care what you do, but the thing is, you got to know what's not right. I'll see you. Big Jim, thanks a lot. We'll see you next month. God bless you all. Bye-bye.